if you were glancing through one of the papers this morning, and this was in the Telegraph, I really want to control my response to this, because there is a group called Independent Sage. Now, Independent Sage is a bunch of scientists, and probably a mixed body, of people who were clearly not appointed by the government to do what Sage do. And we all have views on that. As if one Sage isn't enough, we have to have another one, Independent Sage. Nobody asked for them. They just emerged themselves, and they are definitely on the side that says, bring on the restrictions. If Boris Johnson brings in a restriction, they shout more. If he takes restrictions down, they say too soon. You know, actually, a bit like most of the media, to be fair, so they're not alone there. Not that you'll find that here on Talk Radio. And can you believe now that these pro-lockdown experts are basically now trying to rebrand the words we use when we talk about measures introduced by the government to restrict our movements, our freedoms, whatever you want to say, such as we are in at the moment with Plan B, and we have been talking about coming in the future. And basically, they have now said that we should not call them restrictions. We should call them protections. I mean, it is so... it's quite intimidating in a way, isn't it, really? When language is used like that, it tends to be the propaganda experts who will try and make something that is unacceptable seem to be acting in your interests and therefore acceptable. It is all this movement that we seem to be drifting to. I don't even think everyone's clever enough to make it a conspiracy. This movement that we're drifting to have a sort of socialist, centrally controlled government by public health. Because actually, the governments grant themselves huge powers under the Public Health Act. You would have heard me go on about that, and people like Steve Baker in the past. And essentially, they're saying, emergency, I mean, this is a chap called Dr. Hake of Independent Sage. No idea what he does in his day job, okay? Emergency COVID public health measures, he said, are not restrictions. They're protections. I mean, just think about what he said. So these measures that restrict me going shopping or going to a pub, do you remember the rule of 6? Those restrictions that said I couldn't mix with people, they're not restrictions. No, he wants to eradicate the concept that they are restrictions, and he wants to call them protections. This is actually kind of ominous in one part, but the other part of me just wants to ridicule it, because it is absolutely absurd that this self-appointed body, right, which I'm not sure many people actually want or listen to unless it comes up with some decent news angle to scare us all with, are basically telling us how we should describe what the government is doing in our name. And if that is what Independent Sage has now become, I strongly recommend that you don't listen to anything else that comes out of their mouths, simply because they are now more concerned with the presentation to support restrictions, it seems, rather than even trying to debate the science. Maybe they've given up on the science. It's quite noticeable, isn't it, actually, that as Omicron develops, and the way we think it's going to develop, that people are retreating from arguing as passionately as they were doing even a week ago for stronger restrictions.